For generations, getting your driver's license was the moment. It was the ultimate symbol of freedom. But for Gen Z, that symbol of liberation is being replaced by something else entirely, a deep, profound sense of anxiety. Now, it's really easy to just dismiss this as, kids being lazy or entitled, but that is not what's happening here. The research is actually showing a really complex and, frankly, a very rational response to a world that has just fundamentally changed. This friction is real, and it's happening in the minds of young drivers everywhere.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What exactly changed? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into the powerful forces, both outside the car and inside the driver's own head, that have turned this classic rite of passage into a massive source of stress.
To really get what the driver is feeling, we first have to understand the world they're driving in. You see, today's learners have a whole bunch of invisible passengers along for the ride, and they hopped in long before the key was ever put in the ignition. The first passenger is kind of like a ghost of the pandemic. For a generation that spent some really crucial formative years in isolation, the intense, close quarters interaction of a driving lesson with a total stranger can trigger some serious social anxiety. It's not just about learning to drive. It's about trying to survive the social encounter. And this number, well, it provides some really critical context. A staggering 94% of Gen Z report dealing with regular mental health challenges. So think about what that means. Nearly the entire generation is bringing a baseline of heightened anxiety into an already high-stress situation like learning to drive. And then there's the money pressure. The cost of just owning and insuring a car has absolutely exploded. So a simple fender bender isn't just an inconvenience anymore. For a lot of young people, it represents potential financial ruin. This fear acts like a massive psychological brake pedal before they even start the engine. This chart really puts it all into perspective. I mean, when you see that a huge part of this generation is worried about basic things like finding a place to live or getting a good job, the massive expense of a car naturally slides way down the priority list. Driving shifts from being a necessity to being a luxury. And let's not forget the planet. For a generation that's deeply, deeply concerned about climate change, driving a gas-powered car can feel like an ethical failure. This eco-guilt creates a kind of subconscious resistance, turning the very act of learning into something they feel morally conflicted about. So what happens when you take all of these external pressures and you get behind the wheel? Well, they show up as a very specific set of internal fears. Welcome to what we're calling the cockpit of anxiety. Okay, so here's a fascinating shift in mindset. Past generations were worried about getting into an accident. Gen Z, on the other hand, is overwhelmingly worried about causing one. There's this sort of hyper-empathy that sees the car as a potential weapon, and that leads to overcautiousness and a paralyzing fear of hurting someone else. Then you've got the constant feeling of being watched. Insurance apps, parental trackers, dash cams. Every single turn, every brake, every acceleration can be monitored and scored. It creates this digital panopticon, where you're not just driving, you're performing for some judgmental algorithm. This quote just perfectly captures that feeling. It's not a helpful guide, it's this constant, invisible critic that has direct access to your wallet. The pressure is just immense. And what this means is that the social danger can often feel way more threatening than the physical danger. Stalling at a green light isn't just a mistake, it's a potential cringe event. And in a world where any embarrassing moment can go viral, the fear of public humiliation is a powerful, powerful deterrent. So what happens when you take all of these individual fears and you plug them into the internet? Well, you get an amplification effect, a social media echo chamber that we're calling the horror loop. If you're a learner driver online, you cannot escape these stories. They are everywhere. These viral tales of disastrous lessons and failed tests, they create a cultural narrative that frames the entire learning process as a negative, maybe even a traumatic experience before it even begins. And a huge theme in these stories is the instructor as the villain. This trope erodes trust in the very people who are supposed to help, and it reinforces the idea that the whole system is rigged against you. It turns a potential mentor into an antagonist. This table really connects all the dots. You see, these viral themes aren't random. A story about a predatory instructor feeds directly into that interpersonal distrust. A cringe event video amplifies the fear of judgment. Social media essentially creates a feedback loop. giving you constant proof that your worst fears are completely valid. But, it's not all doom and gloom. Amidst all of this anxiety, a new culture is starting to emerge, one that's focused on celebrating the small victories and finding a sense of control in a high-pressure world.
Take the humble drive-through. Successfully navigating one is a huge win. It's a low-stakes test of your spatial awareness and your social performance under pressure. It's a conquest of both the fear of judgment and decision paralysis, all for a burger and fries.
And there are others. That first time you drive all alone, just blasting your favorite song, the moment you stall and you just calmly restart the car, ignoring all the honks. These aren't just driving skills. They are acts of resilience that chip away at the bigger anxieties. So what does all of this mean for the future? Well, it means we need to stop looking at the driver so much and start looking at the map. The journey itself has changed, and our approach to it needs to change too. So here's the key takeaway. The anxiety that Gen Z feels isn't a personal flaw. It is a logical, completely understandable reaction to the world they've been asked to navigate. The problem isn't the driver, it's the road itself. And this really points to the path forward. Driver's ed needs to evolve. We need to be teaching resilience right alongside the rules of the road. This could mean things like anxiety management techniques, using VR to safely practice high-stress scenarios, and reframing the ultimate goal from some abstract concept like freedom to the much more tangible goal of agency. Getting a license is still the destination, but the path to get there is filled with all these new obstacles. The challenge for all of us, for educators, parents, policymakers, is to stop using an old map for a new world and to start drawing a better one.